asylum here. The UK takes actually a pretty small number of asylum seekers compared to many other
because
countries.
we're a smaller country, per capita we take a lot more. Because we're a smaller country, per capita we take a lot more than France and Germany.
The vast majority...
France does take more per capita in terms of asylum seekers than we do. I think Germany might as well, but France takes more per capita. We are quite far down the list. Actually, before we move on, I just want to say, Zia, you are right, in fact, that France takes fewer asylum seekers per capita than the United Kingdom. We take more than that. It's important to get that right. OK, let's move on. Take our next question. From...
This most recent question time, which aired last Thursday, is the best you'll ever see. Reform Chairman Zia Yusuf took on the full BBC woke machine single-handedly. I mean, the entire audience, the panel, the host, Fiona Bruce, and the whole production team behind the scenes that set the programme up to be against him and reform. It was a complete humiliation. The host, Fiona Bruce, nearly had a fit when he called out their left-wing bias. She then tried to prove him wrong by saying to the audience, "Put your hands up if you voted for reform." Zia shook his head as, at best, 2 hands went up. It was hilarious. She then tried to cover up her embarrassment by saying, "I asked how many who voted for reform wanted to put their hands up. It's not the same as telling them to put their hands up." What an insane excuse. He made a complete fool of her. We all know it has a left-wing bias. All the questions fired at him were pro-immigration. You could feel the anti-reform sentiment in the air. Every open borders pro-immigration statement that was bombarded at him was met with massive applause from the audience. Then, as he went to reply to the attempts to discredit his arguments, Fiona Bruce interrupted, saying, "He's had too much time speaking, let's give other panellists a chance to speak." Things then got even worse for Fiona Bruce. The Green Party candidate was banning on about open borders for all and how immigrants' rights to move here should come before the rights of British citizens. Yusuf was calling out her arguments, which she had no response to. The less said about the Green Party's immigration policy, the better, which, in all honesty, I think Labour largely agree with. She said Germany and France take in more asylum seekers than Britain does. Yusuf corrected her and said per capita Britain takes in more than France. Unbelievably, Fiona Bruce then interrupted him to say he's wrong. Then, obviously, the production team fact-checked it and got back to her through the earpiece later on in the show. She then had to publicly apologise to him live on air, as he was, in fact, correct. In fairness, at least she apologised, but her total humiliation by that point was complete. It makes me laugh when people say the BBC does not have a left-wing bias. How can anyone watch this and say otherwise? But in this instance, it wasn't enough. Yusuf was more than a match for the lot of them. I only have the audio because I'll get done for copyright if I use the footage.
Let me move on. Take another question now from Tim Bevan.
What positive action has the Labour government taken to stop the small boat crossings as they approach 3 months since taking office?
OK, well, Nick, this is also a question for you, but I will come back to you in a moment just to give everyone a bit of a shout. Zia.
Well, it's obvious that the first action that Labour took was to cancel the Rwanda programme. And as much as it was a bone-headed programme, given that the Conservative government paid for it up front, it was a deterrent. So Labour took away the deterrent for no apparent reason. And the proof of that is now it looks like Germany. Now it looks like
the Rwanda plan.
We weren't in favour of it. But once it's already in place and paid for up front, £230 million of British taxpayer money paid for up front, Keir Starmer cancels it on day one, removes the deterrent. And as a result of that, in the 80 days since Keir Starmer has taken power and has been in Downing Street, compare that to the last 80 days of the Conservative government, the number of people crossing the Channel illegally has grown by 60%. Keir Starmer promised to smash the gangs. All he has done is smash his own credibility.
OK, but let's just examine your policies for a minute. So are you saying Nigel Farage has been very critical of the Rwanda plan, says it's nonsense, effectively. So on the one hand, you're saying there shouldn't be the Rwanda plan, and now Labour have got rid of you, saying you're criticising them as well. So you want it both ways.
Two things can be true at the same time. The Rwanda programme was boneheaded because there hasn't been the courage inside Westminster to cancel, to leave the European Court of Human Rights, replace it with the British Bill of Rights, which puts the rights of British people first. That's the first step. Then secondly, we need to say that anybody who comes to this country illegally cannot be granted asylum. So we actually understand how incentives work, which clearly Keir Starmer does not. If you do those things, the boats will stop coming very quickly. And that would also mean that we can pick up the boats as they come in, take them back to France, which, by the way, that has happened. You know, when Nigel Farage made this point during the general election and said our Royal Navy could take those boats back to France, he was roundly pilloried, essentially, by the left, claiming that, oh, there was no way that that could happen, that the French Navy would get involved. Well, what happened? A few weeks ago, Border Force took a boat back to France and it was accepted back. For some reason, presumably because it actually worked, that has stopped happening. So that is how you stop those boats.
So what you're suggesting then is that, on the one hand, there shouldn't be the Rwanda plan, but there should be the Rwanda plan. And when it comes to boats, you're suggesting, but en masse, people that come over on small boats should be picked up and put on the shore in France. And you think France would accept that? And you think France would accept that?
It's already happened. I don't think
I'm not talking about a handful. I'm talking about en masse.
So you have to do all of those things at the same time. Firstly, you leave the European Convention of Human Rights, replace it with the British Bill of Rights. You utilise our Royal Navy. We spend £52 billion per year on defence. The notion that the United Kingdom cannot take back dinghies back to France is absurd.
Okay. And so you think the French government would accept that?
I think that would be a difficult conversation. If we're not going to have a difficult conversation with France about the sovereignty of this country and the security of our borders, then explain to me what on earth we would have a difficult conversation with France about.
All right. Now, Nick, as I said, I'm going to come to you. So, Carla, the question is about stopping the small boat crossings. Now, in the Green Party website, you want to see a world without borders. So, presumably, you might not want people coming across the small boats because it's potentially fatal, but you're very happy to let anyone come who wants to come.
I'm really glad that Labour have scrapped the Rwanda scheme. It was incredibly expensive and incredibly cruel. Putting aside the sort of long-term goals of a world we'd like to see, which is what that particular line you're referring to is about.
Well, just explain what that is so we understand.
Well, what's in our manifesto is about...
Well, this is on the website, on the party website. The Green Party wants to see a world without borders. So what would that look like to everyone here?
So that's more of about a long-term vision where there is more, where everyone has more freedom of movement, and where we're more welcoming, we have a more humane approach to immigration. But that's very much a different...
If there are no borders, that means anyone who wants to come could come.
But that's very different to the world we're in now. And as someone said...
It's on your website, so I presume you mean it.
...said, you know, we've got to work from the situation we're in now. And so our approach, what we had in our manifesto and what we've been pushing the successive governments on, is about a more humane approach to immigration. And so I'm really glad to see that the Rwanda scheme's been scrapped, but I'm pretty worried to see Starmer visiting the far-right Italian Prime Minister to get tips on how to deal with immigration by intimidating asylum seekers out of seeking refuge from political oppression and violence. You know, I think
from France. They're coming from France, which last I checked is a safe country.
It is a human right to seek asylum in the country of your choice, and it's a legacy of colonialism that there are many people across the country who have links to the UK.
Because of colonialism, Britain should now have open borders?
And so they have a right to claim asylum here. The UK takes actually a pretty small number of asylum seekers compared to many other
because
countries.
We're a smaller country, per capita we take a lot more. Because we're a smaller country, per capita we take a lot more than France and Germany.
The vast majority of refugees are displaced within their own country or to the immediate neighbouring countries. I'm just saying that the UK should be taking its responsibility to support people fleeing war and oppression seriously.
All right.
And while I'm glad that the Rwanda scheme is gone, there is still an awful lot more that the UK could be doing. Chief amongst those would be ensuring that we allow safe and legal routes for those fleeing oppression and violence to apply for asylum from overseas, because that's the real way to tackle the issues with small boats. That's the real way to stop deaths in the Channel, is to give people those safe and legal routes to apply, acknowledging that the majority of people who travel by those routes are granted asylum. They are recognised as refugees, and the UK does eventually recognise its responsibility to support them. Let's not force them into the hands of traffickers to do that.
All right, let me come around here. Just a quick... does take more per capita in terms of asylum seekers than we do. I think Germany might as well, but France takes more per capita. We are quite far down the list.
Can I just come in for a second?
No, let me just ask this woman here. I'll come back to you then. Yes.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm interested in Zia's comments about the Reform Party's attitude to asylum seekers, because obviously we all know that you have to be on UK soil to claim asylum
legally, yes.
So are we saying now that if Reform were in charge, there would be no asylum seeking in the UK?
No, I didn't say that. What we need is a coherent immigration policy rather than a shambolic one. We firstly need secure borders. If you don't have secure borders, then you have no control over the people coming and the number of people coming. That's the first point. The second point is we've had a massive explosion in the size of our population. And what we stand for is saying, first and foremost, the sworn duty of the British government is to put the interests of citizens of the United Kingdom ahead of citizens of other countries.
So in terms of the woman's question there, how could asylum seekers legally seek asylum in the UK?
Well, a sensible system could be created to do that, but frankly, far too many people have come here in a short period of time.
Any idea what it might be?
We've had 1.8 million. We've had, just like any country that has a sensible asylum regime, but because we have open borders,
okay, so
because we essentially have a soft-touch welfare state, people are coming here from, as I said, from countries like France. I put it to you again, these are people who are coming here across the Channel. They're not coming from Syria and they're not coming from Gaza. They're coming from France. We should ask ourselves why that is.
Some of them coming from Syria via France, of course, but I hear you were saying the last country they were in was France. Yes, the woman here in the cream jacket, a little bit further along. Yeah.
Hi, I'd just like to comment that it's rich coming from a very hypothetical position, which I feel the Reform Party is coming from. We've had Labour, we've had Conservative governments trying to sort out and actually reinforce our borders. So I have to apologise that I find your statements quite hypothetical. And to Fiona's point, what would be the policy? I didn't hear a strong policy from Reform to say what they would actually do. It sounds like criticism of what has been happening with the government in terms of trying to reinforce our borders. So what would Reform do that is so different from the Conservative and the Labour Party?
So firstly, clearly another representative BBC Question Time audience, given Reform won.
OK, I'm just going to stop you there. Zia. We have a representative proportion of people in here who voted Reform. And now, I don't know if any of you want to put your hands up.
How many people voted
let's hear
for
from
Reform?
We're going to get an answer to your question, but let's hear from...
3.
Well, no, it's not 3. I said who wants to put their hands up. That's a very different matter. Okay. Actually, before we move on, I just want to say, Zia, you are right, in fact, that France takes fewer asylum seekers per capita than the United Kingdom. We take more than that. It's important to get that right. OK, let's move on. Take our next question.